I'm Sean Sylver, and this is Cracked Rear View. Each week, we talk with an interesting guest about the music we love through the lens of the 1990s CD Club deal. I started this show because, for me, the idea of getting 10 CDs for a penny when you were a kid, yeah, it's a post on social media these days saying, hey, remember that thing? But it's also an opportunity to visit with our past selves, the worlds we were creating back then, our friends, the things we loved doing, and the soundtrack to it. Maybe you remember actually getting 10 CDs for a penny? The exhilaration and the subsequent fallout. Maybe you saw that ad in a magazine and turned the page. Maybe it missed you completely. But we all listened to music when we were kids, and because we were kids, it made us feel something. We listen to that same stuff now, or to music that draws on an influence from 25 or 30 years ago because it always does, and there's still something there. And our relationship with music is simple and complex, and it's a part of who we are. I said at the outset, wouldn't it be cool to talk to the DJs? The ones, literally cultivating our relationship with music. Spinning the songs that we fall in love with, we go buy the album, we go see the band. The algorithm can't tell us why any of this matters. But people can. And today's guest is Adam 12, one of my absolute favorite people in radio. We're going back to 12's freshman year, 1991 and 92, a most pivotal time for music. Cracked Rear View, welcome to Adam 12, co-host of the ROR Morning Show with LBF right here in Boston, Massachusetts. 12, this podcast goes back to the 90s. You started your radio career in the decade of the 1990s, and I'll start with this. In more recent years, we've worked for the same company, but whether you know it or not, you've kind of always been there for me, and that is, to me, the ultimate DJ-listener relationship. Appreciate you coming on and chopping it up today.
Well, I mean, Sean, it's a bit of a mutual admiration society. You are the 6'4" menace from East Dennis. So, I mean, how am I going to say no, for real? No, and first of all, thank you. That does mean a lot to me, and I do get that compliment a lot from people because I have been doing this for a long time. I like to make jokes about how I'm old, but I'm kind of not because I started when I was like 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
But it's been a real blessing to be able to be a consistent point of musical reference and cultural reference with regards to Boston and people's lives for so long, working at FNX and BCN and Rock 92.9, Radio BDC and D617, The Hub, and now WROR. But I've again, Mutual Admiration Society. I've been a fan of yours and your work on the Sports Hub for years. Those Sean Sylver pipes coming at me before or after a Celtics game was always something I've enjoyed, and it's been nice to connect with you over the years. And when you reached out to me to do this, I don't say yes to many podcasts. A lot of times I can't. A lot of times I'm like, oh, you can't do any podcasts unless it's like for the company. So it's nice. You got to like backdoor a little bit since we do both work for the same company. But yeah. I'm such a fan of you and such a fan of this format and this concept that you've come up with that once I got the heads up, it was easy to say yes. I'm looking forward to it.
You specifically mentioned the fall in 91 as being pivotal for you. A lot of us kind of know the context, like a half dozen or so classic killer albums come out within a few weeks of each other. And I'm just kind of interested in meeting you where you were back in 1991, 1992, hearing about how you were processing just an absolutely massive time for music, which, I've got to think was part of what got you into doing what you've been doing now for multiple decades on.
Yeah, I mean, so I have the blessing of I started high school in the fall of 91.
Okay.
And I finished college in the spring of 99. So like I spent that entire decade in like that sweet spot of, your like 14 to like 22, like soaking in those ages that you really kind of dig into popular music and soak in popular music, whatever that happens to be in that era of your life. And it really it's where you get your musical DNA. I was lucky too, where I grew up with parents who had a great record collection and great taste in music. I mean, I remember being a little kid and pulling out like Police records and Who records out of their, record collection, looking at the cover art being blown away by that. They would have friends over and put on, the Derek and the Dominoes record, or put on Beatles records or
Yeah.
whatever else. So
Yeah.
that was always there. BCN, I grew up listening to because my folks listened to it. When I got old enough to be able to spin the dial myself and figure out what else was out there, I found FNX. Those stations, plus getting into high school in the fall of 91, when, as you mentioned, you had that 41-day stretch where like six like amazing albums all came out. Arguably biggest one of those was Nirvana's Nevermind. And I remember being in like the band room of Wakefield High School before school started one day. And I think it was Kurt Washburn, who was a year or two ahead of me, had the album on his Walkman. And we'd heard like Smells Like Teen Spirit by then on the radio, or seen it on MTV. And I remember like him putting his headphones on me. And it was one of the other tracks. It might have been like Territorial Pissings, or it might have been Drain You or something. But I was like, oh, wow, this band sounds like that too. And that being kind of like a watershed moment and that entryway into, and we'll get into some of these because they happen to be in the BMG ad that you sent me, and of course I ended up picking them, and I picked them back in the day too. But just to come into, be 15 years old, 14, 15 years old, as this era of music is just beginning. I mean, I couldn't have asked for better timing.
You've seen it, obviously, and just mentioned right there how you came upon Nevermind for the first time. Do you see any benefit in the old way of how we used to come onto things versus the way that we're consuming new music now? I mean, there's an argument to say that a lot of it was curated through the major radio stations, through MTV, right? But I guess there just was a lot more of an indie presence out there, local hot spots where you could go and check out music. And of course, just the old word of mouth traveling through the high school halls, right? Where somebody's got a Walkman, like what a
Yeah,
luxury item.
yeah.
It's kind of crazy to consider. I guess I'd have to ask my kid in 30 years how he came upon music at this time, and if it sticks as a memory as much as that sort of stuff does for me and you.
I think it does, and I definitely hear where you're coming from. I think part of it too, we were really lucky to grow up. You grew up in the Boston area too, right, Sean?
I'm a Cape Codder,
Cape
so
Cod,
yeah,
yeah.
basically, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were really lucky to have the radio stations that we had, because had we grown up in, Nebraska or whatever else, you wouldn't have had college radio
Mm,
stations that had the depth and breadth of WZBC and WMBR and WERS and stations of that ilk. And then
yeah,
obviously like a commercial station like BCN that was progressive for its era. And like one of the first real alternative stations in the country in WFNX. Like, you talk about that whole like, curation aspect. That's really what drew me to those songs, is being exposed to them, but being exposed to them by a DJ who was passionate
yes,
about it and had knowledge about it and could add depth past just, hey, this is a cool song. And that's always what the DJs that I heard on BCN and FNX, and that I still listen to on like WMBR, like the Late Risers Club DJs. Like, they're always playing, a mix of old and new stuff, punk rock specifically on that show. But that curation piece, I think, even though as you put it, kind of the avenues have changed, people are discovering music less on traditional radio and discovering it more on streaming services. I think there's still a lot of value to that curation experience, because I guess the positive is now everything is out there to be discovered all the time, right? Like, all
mhm,
the
mhm,
barriers are down, and you can, as a young person who's savvy on their phone or on their computer, you can find any era of music and discover any artist you want. But it's almost that, like, it's almost too much, like the faucet's on full blast, right? And you can't
yeah.
even drink out of it. You need to have someone to kind of back off on the faucet or hold a cup under it, give you a little sip or something, and that's where the curation piece comes in. And I think that's still important. That was blogs in the early 2000s, and
Yep.
I try to still do that, even though I work at kind of a classic hits format. I still try to subversively work some music knowledge in there if it makes sense in a way that's going to connect with my audience, and that's kind of true to who I am, because that's really at the core of 30 years in radio. Sean, I sat in the WRBB studios at Northeastern in the summer of 1996, and I did my first radio show, playing songs that I love, that I chose, that I got to play any songs that I want and talk about them on the radio. And I was like, this is the greatest feeling I've ever had. And if I can find a way to get paid to do this, I'm absolutely going to do it. And I did.
Yeah.
And to kind of jump forward into you mentioned like, asking your kids, years from now, because you have younger kids, what their experience is in this era as far as discovering music. I can give you a little bit of that answer because I've got a 21-year-old and a 17-year-old. And the
Yeah.
17-year-old and I have a lot of similar musical DNA. I had shared before we got on a story of they're learning how to drive, and we went up to Wells Beach last Friday for a little day trip to the beach. And I said, "Do you want to drive the way up to Wells Beach?" And they said, "Yeah, sure." And in my car, the rule is if you're driving, you get to pick the music unless you want to turn, that power over to one of your passengers. So, I said, "What are you going to put on?" And they had their little driving mix that they made on their whatever app they're using to listen to music. And then they asked me, they're like, "How long is it going to take us to get there now? Like, can you check the map?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're about an hour out." I said, "Okay, in 15 minutes, I need you to put on Foo Fighters' debut album." Because when they were little, I would put that album on when we drove to Wells Beach, and that would be like the last thing we listened to before we got on
Oh,
vacation. So like
man.
that stuck with them. And I was trying to like explain to them how amazing of a feeling that is. And of course
Yeah.
they're 17, so they don't give a crap. Like, whatever, Dad. Like, just good, like put the album on. But like that, I share that story to share with you that there is absolutely still like young people are absolutely paying attention to music, the way they discover music or who introduces that music to them, and it is making an impact on them.
That's beautiful. And I really hope that there's still some sort of human element that's doing that,
Yeah.
as opposed to say AI or whatever
Yeah,
in
there
the
has to. I mean,
future.
there has to be. I think there always will be. I mean, there's always going to be technology and like AI that comes along, and before that, the different algorithms that the streaming services would use to serve you stuff. But there's always going to be people that seek out a human experience.
To me, that's kind of at the crux of the conversations that we're having here. I think everybody, whether it's, my one of my more recent guests who's in Canada or, the folks here around Boston who I've been talking to, they all kind of have that reference point and they have very specific memories about coming onto stuff. I'm probably opening myself up to some criticism, but my son recently who's 8, was like, "I like Buddy Holly by Weezer."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, wow, where'd you hear that?" And I think he heard it at, I don't know, at school or something. I don't know how he heard it there. Either way, he heard Buddy Holly by Weezer. And he's like, "Do you have any other Weezer music? Can you just like bring up a Weezer playlist?" And I was like, "Dude, I've got some CDs." So I'm thinking about it and I'm like, I don't know where the Blue Album is, but I've got Green Album and Pinkerton right here.
Mm-hmm.
This is an 8-year-old. Let's start with Green Album and
Yes,
let's see
that was
how he
the right
likes it.
choice. That was
So
you can't play Pinkerton for this kid. He'll have hangups for the rest of his life. He's 8 years old. You got to wait on Pinkerton. You got to let him get his heart broken,
uh,
then Pinkerton.
we we listened to, it was a long drive. We listened to Green Album. He really enjoyed it. And then he goes, "What about Pinkerton?" And I said, "Well, let me explain some things here. Green Album is a reaction to Pinkerton. So even though it came after, it's very simple and stripped down. Pinkerton was a little bit too complex for people. So I'm going to have you listen to this right now and you can decide if this is too complex for you."
Mm.
So, 45 minutes later, he just goes, "Dad, I get it why people thought that Pinkerton was a little too crazy."
Smart
I was
kid.
like, "But yeah, one day, son, you'll appreciate all of them,
Yes.
right?"
Yes, indeed.
Oh,
Isn't
man.
it interesting too so that was the same with Cade. Like I feel like our generation of people, when we discovered like the previous generation's music, I felt like
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin was a big touch point for people, as they were going. I remember there were a lot of kids that were kind of like into Iron Maiden. When I was in
Yeah.
like middle school, there were like Hesher kids that were into Iron Maiden albums that had come out like a decade before. I'm like, how did you even find out about this? But I feel like Weezer and Green Day and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, like those three, like for a certain type of kid who likes
Mhm.
pop music and rock music, like those continue 30 some odd years on to be a band that they discover and is kind of their entryway into, that style of music. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's just some soldier on for whatever reason. Some are still out there, touring or doing gigs,
Mm-hmm.
and some just kind of get lost in the dustbin of time, and it's up to us to unearth and share the glories with the next generation.
Indeed.
I would be remiss if I didn't, hitting on the theme of this podcast, the vaunted 8 CDs, 10 CDs, 12 cassettes, whatever it is, for a penny deal that was offered in so many different magazines back in the day. Did young Adam 12 ever get compelled to send back the postcard and join the club?
I didn't. It's funny. Like I wish a young Adam 12 had known because his head probably would have exploded. Like for whatever reason, maybe I don't know why, but that missed us in
Wow.
Greenwood growing up, and I don't know if we just weren't on the mailing list or if my parents were savvy enough to be like, "Oh, this is a scam. Get rid of this. Don't let the kids see this one." But I
Yeah.
remember finding out about it later on and be like, "Oh man, where was that?" Like I was spending all my paper route money down at the record store. I could have been getting great deals and been buying a whole lot of these in bulk and such. But no, I never took advantage of the Columbia House or the BMG. It wasn't kind of until after it had become like a big thing that I found out about it. And by that time, kind of nobody was doing it anymore.
Yeah, it just kind of fell apart once Napster and
Mm-hmm.
iPods and all that stuff took over. And I don't think anybody in the industry was all that sad to see them go because they were bilking the
Yeah,
artists on the
of course.
royalties. But I think there was a generation of teenagers, save for you and my wife, who had no idea that it was going on. There's a few people out there who
Oh, you were
somehow
into it. I was listening
missed
to
the
you
wave.
and Michael Murata going back and forth on one of those other episodes. And yeah, this is Sean Sylver took full advantage of these deals.
I'm not a very organized person, but when it came to this, I was keeping score. I wanted to make
Yep.
sure I came out on top. So
Yep.
I want to go back to 1991, Adam 12, freshman in high school. And yeah, today you get to take advantage of the deal of a lifetime. Get into some of these picks, and kind of like I said, like meet you where you are, like musically. You mentioned, this experience listening to Nirvana for the first time. Definitely some gears started turning there, but I don't know. At this point, were you aware, like acutely aware of the shift that was going on? Had you been like a hair metal guy prior to this?
My friends were. So this is interesting. So again, like my folks were definitely like into, hippie music, classic rock, all that stuff. Like they both graduated high school in like the late 60s, early 70s. So
Yeah,
again, that was the record collection growing up. And they continued to listen to great music, into the 70s and 80s when I was a kid.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so
You
there was
mentioned like the having the police. I mean, like
yeah,
literally
having the
just
police and
continued
like
into their
yeah,
yeah,
like Rolling Stones, all of the kind of like the Aerosmith, all of those like, great classic rock acts of the era. Um, but it's funny, like I was aware of that, and then I was aware that there was this kind of new music revolution happening because I was a big MTV fan, and they were talking
mhm,
a ton about it on MTV. Man, I heard Kurt Loder talking about it, and Tabitha Soren talking about it, and MTV News, and all the VJs like Martha Quinn, they were doing their thing talking about it. But I never really made the connection until I got older that of like how big that shift was and how momentous it was, because for me it was more of you're a kid, your world is your neighborhood and your town and all that, and your influences are your parents and or your siblings and or maybe your friend's cool older brother or cool uncle, in my case my
right,
uncle Neil.
right,
It was less about like the seismic shift in the music culture and more like, oh, this is cool music that's like sounds like my parents' bands, but isn't my parents' band. So like I can make this my own. Because you go through that rebellious phase as a teenager. And the way that, at least for me, that manifested with music is like, all right, my parents' record collection is cool, but like I want to go find some of my own stuff. And I remember watching some like MTV Spring Break thing in
mhm.
like the late 80s. Whenever Cheap Trick had Lap of Luxury out and
Oh
they were
man,
playing, I probably had heard like or seen a Cheap Trick music video or song or whatever, but I just was like, oh, these guys seem really cool. So again, I wasn't a Columbia House BMG dude. I was a deliver the Wakefield daily item and spend all my tip money that I didn't spend on soda and chips on tapes at
yeah,
Strawberries on Route One in Saugus.
there we go.
So I went out and bought the new Cheap Trick tape, Lap of Luxury. I bought an older one called, was it In Color? It might have been In Color. Whatever one has She's Tight on it. And that was like my first like favorite band that I discovered on my own, and that was like that was my thing that I found. And then again, this is like late 80s, so yeah, hair metal was a big thing, and I remember seeing those videos on MTV, and my friends were all into it. My friends were all into like Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue, and I just thought it was corny. Sorry, Michael O'Connor Murata, if you're watching this, but like, because I know how much he loves that stuff, and a lot of people did. But I just
Yeah.
remember my friends would be like, "Oh, like Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose." I'm like, he looks so wimpy and weird. Like, why do you guys like this guy? Like, his voice sucks. Like, what's the deal with Guns N' Roses? And part of that was just being kind of Gen X-y and iconoclastic, and like, oh, if something's popular, then it can't be good, right? Like, it took me
Yeah.
a while to grow out of that as you know, a Gen Xer. But while my friends were kind of leaning hard into like the hair metal and that kind of late '90s pre-alternative grunge boom or rather late '80s pre-alternative grunge boom in the early '90s, that's when
Yeah.
I found hip hop, and that's when I was like, oh, De La Soul, they seem cool, they look cool, like they're rapping and they got a hook, and wait a minute, is that a Steely Dan song on the background? I know that song, like
Yeah.
that's cool. They found like a Steely Dan song to rap over. And then I'm checking out Third Base and Public Enemy, and I got my Tribe Called Quest hat on here. Like, so I kind of, that was my like late '80s, early '90s bridge into what ended up happening with alternative music. And then, you know, as I mentioned earlier, kind of got into the grunge explosion and everything that came out of that as well.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I mean, I remember kind of holding on to stuff. Like I grew up on the same block as I was the fifth oldest of the male cousins. Like my
Okay.
aunt up the street, and then my other aunt was on the other side of the block.
Yeah.
And, they all thought that Van Halen and Def Leppard and whatever, all that was, all that was cool. So I
Yeah.
thought that was cool. So by extension, my 90s was a rude awakening where it was like grunge is taking over, hip hop is taking over. And I'm just not ready for that because I still want to like the stuff that my older cousins
Yeah. Cause that's cool to
enjoyed.
you. Right.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's interesting. But yeah, it took a little while, but kind of like you said, I've wound up figuring out like what my niche really was when I went out to go get it. So some stuff that I don't know, for me, like Nirvana just never hooked me.
Yeah.
It just didn't.
Yep.
It seemed like everybody had that, everybody had Nevermind, but then certain bands did. That's why we have these conversations, because like we're looking at the same ads sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
people have completely different sensibilities about what they want to pick. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to hear what you are going to pick. So yeah, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely. So you sent me the BMG from spring of '92, which again is perfect because it's got some stuff from the that fall of '91 that was such a watershed.
Yeah,
And again, obviously, I got to do the 12 cassettes for a penny because I was rocking them in my Sony Walkman. Thanks, Uncle Mike, for giving me a Sony Walkman back in the day, and throwing in the cassette tapes as I did my pay. It was a perfect circle, Sean. I would use the tip money to buy the cassette tapes and then listen to the cassettes while I delivered the Wakefield Daily.
that's
I
that's,
just
that's
all I did,
amazing.
dude, I went through and I'm like, I'm gonna pick 12 and I'm gonna pick if there's anything on here that I bought back in the day, I'm gonna
Yeah,
pick it again. And
yeah,
then a couple of things that I probably would have had I known, or in a couple of cases, stuff that other people turned me on to. But like the first one that popped out was Das Effects Dead Serious, which
yeah,
hip hop duo, saw them on Yo MTV Raps. Their whole thing was like kind of tongue twister, fast rap kind of a delivery. They Want Effects was their single. And I remember, again, I've been into De La Soul and Public Enemy and A Tribe Called Quest. And that was similar where these guys were a little bit darker, rapped a little bit faster, and it was less about content, more about wordplay. And I thought that was kind of cool.
yeah. Das Effects. I think I came on to them because they Fresh Prince of Bel Air. Will
Mm-hmm.
Smith goes away from the summer and he comes back home, and like that's the song that is playing as he gets back to the Bel Air mansion.
Nice.
They were on Check Yourself with Ice Cube, I
Yeah.
believe, right?
Yep.
So that was kind of like Ice Cube bringing them in. They weren't hard like Cube,
Yes.
and like you said, the wordplay. And that to me really made them stand out because there were a million people who were trying to be, gangster rap
Oh
at the
yeah,
time.
exactly. That was the big gangster thing, and it's funny like that. That was fine, but it wasn't what I liked. Creativity. That's
Yeah.
why I like De La Soul. And then like it's funny, Das Effects. I'm just making this connection now. Das Effects with that kind of playfulness in their lyricism and kind of the quick delivery. you go forward a few years, you got Gift of Gab, who's part of like DJ Shadow's collaborative out in the Bay Area. He was another MC that I really, rest in peace, that
Yeah.
I really got into. Same
Yeah.
deal. Like that dude, I think at one point might still be the fastest rapper, like in the Guinness World Book of Records, like can rap the fastest in that he can say more words per minute than any other
Mhm.
rapper can do. So that type of stuff I'm into. And I had that on cassette. I absolutely bought that cassette. I bought
Nice.
Arrested Development's 3 years, 5 months, 2 days. Was it Tennessee, Mr. Wendell? Like those were the jams on that one. It was
Yep.
funny too, because like I'm growing up in this unbelievably white suburb in Wakefield, Massachusetts, and putting on MTV and seeing artists like, seeing these hip hop artists, seeing Arrested Development, and just being blown away. It was like that was such an alien experience and concept to me, and it was compelling, and it was cool to kind of figure out about these artists. They got me into another artist from that era, British artist called Soul to Soul, like a
Oh yeah.
completely different cultural experience than what I was used to. That's kind of the theme, Sean, for me, is like, show me something interesting that I haven't seen before. I love the surprise and delight. It's why I still listen to college radio. Play me
Mhm.
something I've never heard before. Challenge me. Give me a new experience. Like that's what I'm looking for when I'm discovering new music.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I 1000% on that. I mean, there's when something just hits you, it's kind of like get out Shazam,
Yep.
and try and
Yep. What is
but,
this?
it used to be I would, like, get out my notepad. I had, like, a notepad,
Yep.
either in my truck. I had another one that I kept, like, in my house, so when I was listening to the radio, like, in my room, and I would just jot down the lyrics, and then it was a mission to figure out what it was. Pre-computer, certainly
Oh
was
yeah.
definitely a mission. Of course, the ideal is the DJ comes back and tells you what it was, but
Yes.
if you
You miss
miss
the
that,
backspell, you're in trouble. That's
you're
right.
kinda screwed.
Yep. Yep. Sean, I have handwritten the lyrics to the jazz by A Tribe Called Quest. Like I got the
Yeah.
cassette tape for Christmas. I was obsessed with the song. There was no internet at the time available to look up song lyrics on. So I just sat down, rewind, play. I probably got like only 85% of it right. But,
Mhm.
point is that's all you wanted to spend your time doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, in your case, you're big athletes. So I'm sure athletics were a big part of your daily diet. Mine were to a certain point in time. But like by the time we're talking 91, 92, I'm 15 years old. Like it's music, music, music all the time. That's all I was interested in.
Yeah. No, I mean, hey, even now, like, I got a full-time job. I work part-time doing sports radio. It's like, I wanna do a music podcast.
Yeah.
That's why we're here, man. We're just talking about stuff that we love. So Das Effects, Dead Serious,
Yep.
pick number 1.
Das Effects, Dead Serious, number 1. Arrested Development, 3 years, 5 months, 2 days, number 2. And then we're going to take for number 3, we're going to veer off into the 80s because I saw and I like this format too, where they got all the new releases, but they'll throw some old stuff in there to entice you. And this absolutely worked on me back in the day.
Mhm.
Tears for Fears, Tears Roll Down, the hits, which was released in
Nice.
1992. I owned it. I got it later on CD, but I absolutely would have copped this on cassette if I'd known about it back in the day. Because I remember like mid 90s rediscovering a lot of the music in the 80s that like maybe I had missed.
Yep.
Tears for Fears, I was always aware of them. I mean, obviously, Shout, Head Over Heels, but Everybody Wants to Rule the World, big hit, was in that 80s movie, Real Genius. And
Yep.
I remember being like, oh yeah, like I remember that. And then like kind of getting, and I don't know, it's a weird thing, like mid 90s getting like mid 80s nostalgia. Cause I remember like going back and watching Real Genius, Weird Science, The Breakfast Club, like,
Yeah.
those classic mid 80s movies, and almost be like having this weird pang of nostalgia. Like, oh man, I wish I'd been born 10 years earlier. I could have experienced all of that. But I'd like, dude, they're movies. It's obviously like that's kind of sort of not how life was back then. And then the irony of like, getting older and realizing, oh no, I was born at the right time. Like I got to, grow up and live and experience the 90s. But I remember like for a minute I was in, like I bought Tears for Fears greatest hits, Devo's greatest hits, A Flock of Seagulls greatest hits, like
Yeah.
any 80s band that I would like rediscovered. I went and I copped their greatest hits because it was just the easiest way to get as many of their hit songs as you could, and you didn't have to go and pick and choose like, all right, which 2 or 3 albums should I pick up? You know?
I'll see if you can pull this one here. But do you remember your last broadcast on WFNX?
I do.
That's one of my probably favorite radio listens ever because it was just stuff that you loved from over the
Thank you.
years.
Yeah, absolutely
And
was.
that day, you just caught me up on stuff that I might have missed.
Yeah, yeah.
What you were just saying there about like getting nostalgic about an era, like that day, you introduced me to songs and bands that I just, for whatever reason, had just barely glanced me or missed me completely in like the 90s or
Mm-hmm.
2000s. But it was just like, bam.
Sean, it's all I've ever wanted to do. Literally, that's all I've ever wanted to do is just say, hey, if you're listening, I love this song, and here's the reason why, and I think you will like it too. So the fact that that connected with you means the world to me.
Yeah, no, it was great. And Tears for Fears, also a band that I came around to later. Of course, I mean, I was just a wee tot in the 1980s. But I think for me, other than like the radio hits, I remember hearing Break It Down Again in like
Mm,
93
mm.
after they had split,
Yeah.
kind of listening to that album and being like, well, this is different from their 80s stuff. But yeah, I think I got Tears Roll Down like from the local public library and and ripped it and was just like,
Absolutely.
whoa, this is so good. But yeah, that's a great one for sure.
Can we go back to hip hop for my fourth tape?
Yeah, let's do it.
Beastie Boys, Check Your Head,
Check Your Head.
1992.
I saw License to Ill's on here too.
Yep.
What really resonates for you with Check Your Head?
That was the first Beastie Boys album I ever got into.
Yeah.
I missed Paul's Boutique, which is weird because I was like way into hip hop in the late
Mhm.
'90s, but I was aware of like Hey Ladies, Shadrach, but was just like, oh, Beastie Boys, they seem okay. But License to Ill and Paul's Boutique missed me for some reason.
Yep.
Check Your Head came out. The video for I think So What You Want was the I don't remember which the first single was, if it was So What You Want or Pass the Mic.
I think
But
it
I
was Past
remember
the Mic,
seeing
but
both
yeah.
of those videos, yeah, on MTV and being like, oh, this is the Beastie Boys. I need to get on this. And I remember picking up Check Your Head. And I get into the argument with Fred Toucher all the time because Fred Toucher is a Paul's Boutique guy.
Yeah.
I'm a Check Your Head guy. Hardy, I think, is like a Check Your Head, but more of an ill communication guy.
Uh-huh.
And I see those two albums as almost like a part one and a part two because of the era the band was in the early to mid 90s. But I still, to this day, go back to Check Your Head, and it is a perfect album in that it gives you so many different styles, so many different flavors, and really is the first time the Beastie Boys flex how much musical knowledge and
Yes.
ability that they have as rappers, musicians, producers, just cultural mavens. Like that album blows my mind still to this day, and it's over 30 years old now.
It's crazy that those are the same guys from 86 or 87, right?
Right?
When you're
Exactly.
getting
Yeah.
that. And I do remember the videos too, and just the aesthetic, like the DIY aesthetic of them.
Yes.
It couldn't have
Yes.
come out maybe a year or two earlier. It just like people were ready for that.
Hmm.
And that's why it's just an impactful video for you and others. And obviously I feel like in terms of sales, probably Ill Communication might be the one that
Yeah,
sold more
I would
units
guess so because
overall,
that had
right? But
Sabotage on it, and that was like a
yeah,
viral video before viral videos were a thing.
right.
So yeah, and I
But
love that one
that's
too. It's like a one. It's like a one and a 1A situation. You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's okay if they're kind of companions, you
Yeah.
you
Exactly.
can love them both. They're all part of that evolution. Again, another band that didn't appreciate when I was younger, just really wasn't ready for them at the time, but retrospectively come around on Beastie Boys for sure. All right, so you were 4 in?
All right, number five. I said, and this one gets the pullout treatment in the advertisement, so they were really pushing this one. The Cure's 1992 album "Wish"
Oh man.
that has "Friday I'm in Love" on it,
Yep.
among others. But it's funny, like that. I feel like we keep coming back to 1989 because I feel like that was a pivotal year too, because 1989 was like everything. Like you had The Cure and Pixies and hair metal and punk
Yeah.
rock and like
Yeah.
pre alternative and like, Living Color and the Cult and bands like that. And I bring all that up because for Christmas in 1989, so my family on my dad's side, we would do a big holiday, a big Christmas party, and
Mhm.
like it would rotate. One year my family would host it, and then like my aunt and uncle down in Marshville would host, and then my aunt and uncle over in Greenwood would host it. And I remember being down in Marshfield, and like the way that we did it is the aunts and uncles would get different nieces and nephews each year. So it was almost like a
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
like you didn't know who your gift was coming from. So my uncle Kenny and my auntie Carol, they got me two cassette tapes because it was probably like $20 limit, right, per kid.
Sure.
So I got Christmas '89. I got The Cure's Disintegration and
Wow.
Aerosmith Pump for
Wow.
Christmas. And I don't think I touched Pump for 6 months. I just chose
Really?
Disintegration first, and I popped it in.
Yeah.
And Plain Song is the first song on the album. This is the one that has Fascination Street, the love song, and like
Yes.
all the
Yes.
classic Cure songs that everybody knows and loves. And I just remember being like 12 years old, just starting to access my emotions in a way that were confusing and frustrating, and
Yeah.
hormones are starting to ramp up. And just that album was like, there was something about that music that could, like, when I felt anxious, it calmed me down. When I felt nostalgic, it let me lean into it. If I was like crushing on a girl, like the songs were about the girl that I was crushing on.
Mhm.
So that was like, okay, I love this is a band that I love. I think I don't even think I worked backwards into their catalog before I worked forwards, because obviously 92 comes around and Wish comes out and Friday I'm in Love's on the radio. And then it was just like, okay, like all that great 90s, Cure music. It wasn't until later on that I pushed back and got into the 80s fair. But like, I just remember that tandem of like being so into Disintegration. And then when and Wish came out, like, of course I'm going to buy this right away because,
Yeah.
this is a band that I love. It's meant so much to me.
It's interesting because you'd think that Aerosmith's Pump, being radio friendly rock at the time, would
Hmm.
be very accessible to your young
Oh, and the
ears.
music videos, dude. I mean, like Love
Yeah.
in an Elevator, still classic to go back and look
Right.
at. Yeah.
Right. Going down. But
Yep.
you throw in the Cure, and it turns out that that was most accessible to your emotions at the time.
Yes.
And
Yeah. That's the one that
that
spoke to
is
me.
that is funny. I'm trying to think of like specific situations. I mean, but I do remember that happening where, oh, you're lucky, it's a birthday, it's Christmas, it's, you got a little cash and you're rolling into strawberries and you get two
Mm.
and you expect that one of them is going to be the one that you're listening to all the time. And then the other one winds up
Yep.
overtaking it. And you're just like, whoa, wait a minute. How'd this happen? Yeah. How come I haven't listened to Pump in 6 months?
And it's funny because when I did, like, by the time I did, I feel like it had been so big for so long, because I feel like that was another album that had like at least four, maybe five singles on it. Like
Right.
they really worked that one and made videos for all of them. And it was a big, Permanent Vacation in '87 and Pump in '89. I mean, that was the big comeback, right? For Aerosmith,
Hmm.
everybody written them off. And that was their big comeback. And those were like their last two real rock albums before the '90s Aerosmith happens. And that's the stuff you hear on ROR and is, when they started working with the songwriting teams and doing soundtrack songs and
Yep.
all that kind of
Yep.
stuff. So it's almost like a completely different band. But like those two albums bridging that gap. But I remember by the time I got around to it, it had almost like passed me by. I was like, oh, this is fine, but like I'm not into it as much as I'm into some of this other stuff that I'm listening to. But yeah, that whole getting to it once, because that's how it was. Is I remember I would get like I usually cleared about $30 in tips
Hmm.
from delivering the Wakefield daily item, and the rule was I had to put $10 away in savings
Yeah.
every week. And then with the 20 that was left, I could either spend it all or I could save another 10 toward like a long-term thing, right? Because the savings you couldn't, once it was in savings, you couldn't mess with it. That's
Hmm.
for the future. This is my parents doing a tip-top job with my first job of teaching me financial responsibility. And
Absolutely.
then they were like, because I remember saying once, like I wanted to buy like a keyboard, like a proper like 100 sound, plug it into the wall keyboard kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
remember my mom saying, well, like that's a good thing to save you that $10 for. Like if you save that, for 10 weeks, you'll have the money to buy it.
Mhm.
But more often than not, Sean, I was using that $20 to buy cassettes. My main joint was Strawberries on Route 1 in Saugus, begging my mom for a ride over there. And then later on, it would become like they opened a Newbury Comics in Saugus. Or
Okay.
sometimes if I was out with my friends and we hit like the Sam Goody or the Coconuts or whatever else was the Coconuts in Stoneham, I think in the Redstone Plaza. But anyway, all that to say, $20 could get you two new tapes because new tapes are like $8.99, and
Mhm.
then or if you went like back catalog stuff, you could stretch $1. And if I bought older stuff, I could maybe get a third because they'd be like $6.99, $7.99.
Yeah,
But
Super Savers are great
yeah,
value. You
exactly,
see the
like that
sticker
kind of,
on
or like
there,
when I was
right?
doing
Yeah.
the Cheap Trick thing, like you go back and buy the
Yeah.
old Cheap Trick tapes, and those are super cheap. So,
Yeah.
um, but I did the 2-for-1. I brought my $20 to Strawberries in the fall of '91, and with the same $20 bill, Sean, I bought Pearl Jam's 10 and Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger.
Oh, man.
Which one do you think I listened to first? I'll ask you.
I would have listened to Pearl Jam's 10, but something tells me maybe you put Bad Motorfinger in first.
You would be correct. And it was the same thing too, because I was like, Pearl Jam, obviously, both those came out within weeks of each other. No, but
Mhm.
those were the same day, right? I think 10 and Bad Motorfinger were the same day. We can
Like
research that.
September?
You can have your research team do that. Yeah, it might have been the September 24th date. Might have been the
Yeah.
same day as Nevermind. No, you know what? 10 was earlier. 10 was in August. Anyway, I bought them both the same day. I'd seen the Alive video on MTV. I'd seen the Rusty Cage and the Outshine videos for Soundgarden on MTV. And what it came down to was a cover art. Just that Bad Motorfinger logo on the cover of that album just looked so badass. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna start with Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger. And again, I don't think I touched 10 until like 1992 because once that tape had lodged itself in my cassette deck at home or in my Walkman, it was just bouncing back and forth between the two. I couldn't get enough of Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger, and still to this day, it's my favorite album of theirs, and that's saying something because they followed it up with Super Unknown, which
Super
is like
Unknown, yeah.
a perfect album. And I
Yeah.
would argue in some ways that Bad Motorfinger kind of is as well. But
Imagine in this era where the cover art is but a little tiny,
right,
image in the corner
thumbnail,
of your
yeah.
your streaming, app of choice. It was a huge pull back then, and our team did do the research. Pearl Jam, August 27th, Soundgarden, October 8th.
Okay, so yeah, so Soundgarden was the week or two after Nirvana's Nevermind. All right, so then I
So
probably
there you
bought
go.
those. You know what I probably did? I probably bought that when it came out in October, and I hadn't picked up 10 yet. So there you go. I got both of those in one fell swoop. It's interesting too how I couldn't articulate it at the time. If you were into that music in that era, the big four Seattle bands: Nirvana, Pearl
Mhm.
Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and as a 15, 16 year old, like I could hear where there was connective tissue between those bands. I could hear like, you came to understand if you were into alternative music in the 90s, like, yes, cities had sounds and scenes. Like, Boston had Letters to Cleo and Morphine and the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, who were three very different sounding bands.
Yeah.
But if they all share Buffalo Tom, but if those four bands shared a bill, it kind of made sense, right?
Mhm.
So you same thing with Seattle, like these are all quote unquote grunge bands, and there's definitely sonic similarities between them, but they're all their own unique sounds. And then as I got more into them and learned more about them and did more research, it's always been interesting to me that each of those four bands has like almost like a different musical origin story or musical DNA. Like, Nirvana was very punk. Soundgarden was a metal band. Like they were a straight up metal band. Like those early Sub Pop releases, that's a metal band playing, metal songs.
Yeah.
And Chris Cornell's singing these high register, like, why can't I think of Homeboy from Jude? Rob Halford type stuff. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pearl Jam, had this almost kind of hippie, deal where they were like a kind of like an arena rock band. And funny enough, they ended up being like the arena rock band of their generation.
Right.
And then
Right.
Alice in Chains started as kind of like a glammy hair metal band. So,
Right. Right.
those, even as those bands evolved and became popular, you would still hear those little pieces of that musical DNA come out in different ways. And I always like to use Soundgarden's, their biggest hit, Black Hole Sun, is an example. That's a very, melodic song and has a very recognizable hook to it. And then all of a sudden they go into the guitar solo and Kim Thayil just completely blows it all out of the water with this crazy ass metal guitar solo that comes out of left field in this kind of like mid-tempo crossover, like pop rock hit. So, but anyway, all of that to say, those two on the same day with the same $20 bill, those are my number 6 and number 7 picks off of this particular spring of '92 BMG advertisement.
Nice. Well, you were getting killer value with those tapes.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so my son Will says to me the other day, after listening to the Weezer CD, he says he wants to start collecting CDs, which I love. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Are you the kind of guy who's held on to any portion of your physical media? And do you still have tapes?
All of them. All
Yeah.
the tapes, all the CDs, most of them in the basement, some of them up here in the living space for the kids to dig out when they want to. All the records are up here.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was definitely cassette tapes first, then CDs, and I still have them all. Remember too, a career in radio. Like I saved all that promotional stuff, or the stuff
Yeah.
that I
Right.
didn't save back in the day when you could. I would take down because I went to Northeastern, so I was a couple blocks up from Newbury Street. So I would go down to Newbury Street, had Tower Records, had Newbury Comics, had CD Spins, which was a used CDs
Oh,
only,
yeah.
and I would just take a whole bunch of promo stuff that I didn't want or need, and I'd bring it to CD Spins, and I'd be like, "What can I get for this?" And the dude would be like, "All right, I'll give you 10 cents for each of these, a quarter for each of these, and $1 for each of these. Or if you want store credit, I'll give you double." And I always wanted store credit because there was
Yeah.
always stuff that they had there that I wanted instead. So yeah, I still have all of it, and I just hope, like, as I'm a big believer in physical media, especially now. I feel
Yeah.
like people are finally figuring out that yes, streaming is convenient and renting is convenient, but you don't own it, and they can take it away just like that, as
Right.
Sony is doing with their PlayStation. People that we just did this story last week on WROR about how people that bought digital versions of movies through their PlayStation account. Sony's now decided they don't want to pay for the licensing deal anymore. So now the stuff that you paid for and you are supposed to own, Sony is saying, well, now you no longer own this. So, if you own a physical CD, a physical DVD, they cannot take that away from you. So,
Yeah.
love that the young people like your son are figuring out that there's not just nostalgia to physical media, and there's not just that nice like palpable feeling of like opening up the clamshell case of a CD or a cassette tape and like looking at the liner notes of it, but like you own it, you get to keep that. Nobody can take it away from you.
Yeah. Ownership is important. There's a lot of ways that the man can take advantage of you in
Mm-hmm.
this great country of ours. But if you own your physical media, that's yours, damn it.
That's right.
All right. We are 7 in here.
Yeah.
I would have assumed that this would be a good eclectic batch here. So
Yeah.
this has been very interesting to me so far. Where are we headed for 8?
Let's do one more because again, like I loved the hip hop of this era, and I owned this on cassette. So we'll go with Public Enemy's Apocalypse '91, The Enemy Strikes Black, as my number 8. Can't Trust It was the jam. That video was on MTV, Yo MTV Raps. I already owned Fear of a Black Planet and It Takes a
Yep.
Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. Those cassettes I would bounce back and forth between. And again, just speaking as, a white dude who grew up in the Boston suburbs in the 90s, I learned more about Black history and by extension, authentic American history from
Mm,
listening to Chuck D rap
Chuck
about it
D.
than I did in public school. And again, that's not meant to be a slight toward, I had some great educators,
Yeah.
coming up in the Wakefield public school system, but that's just the curriculum and the way that it was taught at that time. Like you didn't learn about guys like Huey Newton. You didn't even really learn about Malcolm X. I mean, you learned about Martin Luther King. Maybe Malcolm X was somewhere in passing, but then all of a sudden I'm listening to these amazing Public Enemy albums and I'm hearing all these names and I'm literally going to the library, the way,
Mm,
BB Library in Wakefield, and be like, who is Huey Newton? Like, I don't know who that is, and I'm looking it up because I hadn't learned about it in school. So
yeah.
it's again kind of cool to think that okay, here was almost like a subversive way to educate people. Wasn't that was KRS-One's thing in BDP? It was like edutainment. Like,
Yeah.
it's a cool way to use that, the vehicle of hip hop, to educate people. And that's precisely what Chuck D was doing. And I love that
Yeah.
album still. That triptych too of, Nation of Millions and whatever it was, 80 whatever, and then Fear of a Black Planet, and then Apocalypse 91. Like those three I still go back to. Those are still great albums to go back and revisit.
I had learned in that actually PE had a bunch of their material stolen prior to the recording of that album.
Hmm.
And it just really makes you think about, you mentioned it as a triptych. Obviously, the third part of that triptych was recorded under duress, right? They still
Hmm.
had a contract to honor, and they didn't have some of their best stuff. Also interesting to think that what you were talking about and how they were really reaching people who maybe otherwise they wouldn't have reached. They include Anthrax on this album, right?
That's right. That's right. They that bring the noise, right?
Yeah. That I think to me might have been the first exposure. Again, very white Cape Cod.
Hmm. Hmm.
Pixie 103, I don't know
Yeah.
what I don't know when I came upon Bring the Noise, but it was somewhere at that time. And yeah, no, I'd love a good PE record as well.
Yep.
Very cool.
All right, so I'll give you a left hand turn into number nine because again I flipped over the advertisement to the other side, and here I was
Hmm.
like, I'm staring at a whole bunch of stuff that I ended up in some way pilfering from my parents. So earlier I was talking about how a lot of my formative music came from listening to them and then pushing back against what they were listening to, and then I realized as I was looking at this that it came full circle because at number nine I'm going to pick Dire Straits on Every Street, which
Wow.
was released in 1991. My parents own this on CD. My dad is a Mark Knopfler disciple. My dad's a guitar player as well, and he
Yeah.
loves Mark Knopfler. My parents had always played Dire Straits records, so they were always on my radar, but like I never really kind of understood. This is the album where I finally understood the brilliance of Mark Knopfler, not only as a guitar player, but as a songwriter. The title track to this song still brings a tear to my eye when I listen to it on Every Street. Like, it's an incredible love song, but told in a very, I don't want to say like almost unconventional way. I remember my parents throwing that on back in the day, and then like going and grabbing it when they weren't around and throwing it on myself, which I guess is like the ultimate compliment, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It seems like every episode I come up with one of those albums too, or it's just like, yeah, I pilfered this from my dad.
Yeah.
It's in my collection, but I remember whose it used to be,
Yep.
for whatever reason. Question for you: were you ever able to catch Mark Knopfler in concert?
Sadly, no. There were a couple times that he toured when I was living out in New Mexico, doing radio out there. But my dad and my brother went and saw him live a
Yeah,
couple of times,
yeah,
and just raved about how great he is. And I, of course, have seen live footage of it. Dude,
sure.
still writing songs and putting out albums, and again, he's just criminally underrated. I feel like if you're like kind of a music nerd or a guitar nerd, you
Mhm.
appreciate him, but I feel like the average music connoisseur does not have a full appreciation for Mark Knopfler's talent.
Yeah, I mean, would it be erroneous to kind of say that Dire Straits, in a different way, kind of like occupies a Steely Dan type niche,
Oh,
and that
sure,
that's
absolutely.
a legendary band, but just doesn't have the breadth of, I don't know, fandom, right? It's
Yeah, because there's like something a little bit niche about both of those. Like
yeah,
it's almost like that kind of best kept secret thing where they're not quite as mainstream as some of their contemporaries, and it's almost like, which I think in some ways makes it cooler because it's almost like
mhm,
this, you know, secret word where you say Steely Dan or Mark Knopfler or someone, and if they get it, you're like, okay, then you and I we got some common ground here. Didn't want Steely
yeah. That's as they call it now. That would be grandpa rock, right? But you got to have the secret code to get it.
Dan.
I remember maybe sometime within the last year, I was like, oh man, would Mark Knopfler still go out on tour? And I think he had announced that his last one he was done.
Mm,
So never say never, but I would love to catch that guy. I would love to
same.
just sit in the same room and listen to him just go to town on that thing.
Yep.
But yeah, no, great stuff. Great stuff. Awesome. Are we at 10 here?
Or 10, yeah. I was gonna say I'll
Wow.
I'll stick with the kind of quote unquote classic rock for
Yeah.
these next couple, because there's another one that my folks owned and kind of gave me a renewed appreciation. Because when you think AC/DC, it's funny, I'll actually shout out my Uncle Neil, like, refuses to acknowledge anything post Bon Scott. I'm like, dude, that's everything. That's like, now it's 9/10 of their catalog. Like, what's the matter? Of course, he does it with his tongue planted in his cheek. But I mean, you had Bon Scott, '70s AC/DC. There, I mean, you don't need to tell the story here. Like, Highway to Hell comes out in '79. Bon Scott dies. They find Brian Johnson. In less than 12 months, they record and release Back in Black, and they end up
It's
within
wild.
12 months releasing two of the greatest rock albums of all time with two completely different lead singers. I mean, that never happens. It'll never happen again. Go to the end of that decade, you get to 1990 and you get to the Razor's Edge. And the Razor's Edge, whether you realize it or not, because Thunderstruck and Money Talks, because those are
Mhm.
the big music videos and those are the big songs that still get played on classic rock radio.
Yep.
But I'm here to tell you that's a really good, that whole album front to back is a great rock album. It's a great AC/DC album. If you like AC/DC and you may be like a little tired of throwing on Back in Black and Highway to Hell over and over again, throw on the Razor's Edge and the title track. That's the standout on the whole thing, man. Listen to the title track of the Razor's Edge, and that is some sick AC/DC.
It's funny with AC/DC, and that's another one where if you listen to rock radio, you're going to consume it. Obviously, those Thunderstrike and Money Talk were
Yeah,
always playing on Pixie 103,
yeah.
down the Cape of my youth. But it was kind of like I had a smattering of AC/DC songs that I liked, but like actually getting into the albums, there's that critique of, well, AC/DC, every song sounds the same.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get to the albums and you're like, well, yeah, sort of, but they're all freaking great. So
Precisely, like, thank you, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's always been. Ramones are one of my favorite bands of all time, and
yeah,
same thing. It's like, listen to a Ramones live album, and it kind of just sounds like one long song. Because again, a big part of what they did live is everything was played faster, and they would play 8, 9 songs before Joey would go, "Ugh," and the crowd would cheer, and he'd go, "It's great to be here in Boston tonight. 1, 2, 3, 4," and then they'd play another 8, 9 songs in a row. Like, it does. It has that kind of, wow, this sounds like one big long song. But if it's a good song, it's not a problem. It's pretty
yeah.
good. So yeah, AC/DC, Ramones, yeah, sure. There's a formula to it, but the formula works.
Excellent point too on the Highway to Hell, Back in Black, back to back. I think I was just something led me over to that recently where I looked it up and I was just like, wait, how long had it been between the death of Bon Scott and the release of Back in Black? It was amazing. I mean, and this would have been around the same time, obviously completely different genre, but a Joy Division flipping to New Order
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
sticking that
absolutely.
landing as quickly as they did. There's few examples of bands. You've got a tragedy, that you're
Mm-hmm.
you're coming back from, and they certainly did. And I know on Instagram, or wherever you're consuming your video content these days, you will get in the algorithm the video of Brian Johnson pre ACDC performing, and it's just like, wow, talk about a facelift. I hope you're not picking Alice
Seriously.
in Chains, because that's no
Okay,
pun
I
intended
almost
there.
did. But I had to be like, again, when I was looking at this, I'm like, I got to go with the stuff that I actually would have gotten back in the
Yeah,
day. So
right.
I almost went facelift, but I wasn't a facelift guy. I went back to that.
Okay.
Dirt was my first Alice in Chains album,
Okay.
so I did Dirt first, and then I kind of went backwards. So I didn't pick Alice in Chains facelift, but for number 11, what I did pick is Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever, because I noticed on that second page of the advertisement, you got some catalog, you got some back catalog stuff on there. It's not all from 91 and 92, because that one's from 1989.
Yep.
That album is the soundtrack to every late 80s, early 90s family vacation to New Hampshire, to Maine. We're driving up to Camden to my great uncle Eddie's chalet in the wintertime. We're driving to Wells Beach in the summertime. My folks are cranking that through the aftermarket tape deck on my dad's GMC Jimmy, and my brother and I are sitting in the back seat and trying not to fight and listening to that just on repeat. And an infinitely replay. Sean, you can play Full Moon Fever on side one, flip it, side two, and then you can flip it over and start it all over again. And you can do that 3 or 4 times and not get tired of it. It's the hallmark of an all-time great album.
It's a no skips. It
Yep.
it really is, and, like, I'm a big, Petty fan. My brother, who's considerably younger than me, I really appreciate the fact that he, has gotten hooked into Petty and is a huge fan. Find myself listening to Tom Petty radio, a lot
Yep.
on satellite, and just people criticize Jeff Lynne, but you know what? Tom needed a little bit of shot in the arm, and wow, just that's all I can say is just the run that Petty went on at the end of the 80s into the 90s there.
Look, when we wrap this up, Sean, because I only got one more left. Take a moment and pull up the Full Moon Fever Wikipedia page and be
Yep.
delighted by the fact that the album was not going to be released. That
Oh, yeah,
whoever
that,
the president of the label was at the time was like, "There's no hits on this album. I'm not putting it out." And
how
then
can you
he either
say
left or
that?
was fired, and the other guy came in and was like, "What's this Tom Petty album that's been sitting here for 6 months?" Oh, well, the last guy didn't put it out. He goes, "Is he out of his mind? Like this is gold. It's Tom Petty from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers soul album. We haven't released this yet. Put this out immediately." And of course, it yields like 6 singles.
Yeah,
Yeah,
insane.
it's crazy.
I'm a big Love Is a Long Road guy. That was a single,
That,
I think, but
yeah. So it's funny. My favorite we did a bit on Rock 92.9 for a few years where
mhm.
we would each we'd pick like an artist a day, and we would pick our top 5 songs from the artist. Like me and Hardy would do it.
Yeah.
And for me, my number one Tom Petty song is on that album, and I think it was maybe the 4th or 5th single, but "A Face in the Crowd," which is
Oh,
almost like a
wow.
ballad. It's like a
Yeah.
mid-tempo. It's
Yeah.
not free falling. It's not running down a dream, which are great songs too. But there's something about the energy and the mood of that song. It's wistful, I guess would be the best way to put it. But yeah, I love "A Face of God." I love the whole album. In fact, I'm probably gonna. It's funny doing this exercise with you. I realized how many of these I haven't listened to in a long time. And like
Yeah.
things, I'm like, oh my gosh, Sean, thank you for reminding me of all my old friends. I haven't visited with them in so long. I'm gonna have to go and visit with them later on today.
Well, I'm really glad that this can benefit you because when I have a conversation with, someone like yourself or with Murata or people who spent their lives entrenched
Yeah,
in music. Like, I'm a music fan, but I'm a sports radio dude, like
sure.
there's a certain amount of information that I've uploaded and I can impress my friends with recall on random stuff from the 80s and 90s, music scene that I remember. But talking to you guys is another level. I'm jotting notes all episode. It's like, oh, I got to check this out. I got to do
Nice.
this song. Maybe I'm going to sample that album here. It's really giving me there's this nice little side benefit to making this
Yeah,
content right now.
I will leave you the breadcrumb trail always. Don't worry about it.
I'm growing in my 40s which is we've talked about this a couple of times on episodes, and I'm 43. So your mid 40s, there's supposedly like this little wiggle that happens where you've been in your music comfort zone for a
Hmm.
while, but you say, "Hey, man, I got to stop and look around and figure out if I'm missing anything before I'm old and decrepit," right?
Hmm.
So the statistically, I don't know how they figure it out around my age. I guess that's when you go snooping around and looking, and then people all eventually wind up back where they started. But hey, I'm doing a podcast and I'm discovering new old music, and I freaking love it.
I was going to say it's the best time for you to be doing this podcast because it gives you the front row seat into all of these different avenues now that you can use to go and discover and rediscover. And I'm actually it's funny you brought this artist up earlier,
Mhm.
and they're the last they're my 12th cassette tape. Is I'm going with Steely Dan Gold, which was
Wow.
again on that second leaf of the BMG advertisement because they're like, "Hey, we got this on the shelf of the we've had this on the shelf of the warehouse for like a decade. So let's see if any of you chuckafools is going to buy this." And I'm absolutely throwing that one into the pile. That's my last pick. So my parents have a friend named Mike, and he was kind of like he's like big tech guy. He was like the first guy to like own a video game system and a first guy to own like a CD player and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
he was like the evangelist of telling my parents, "You've got to buy a CD player. The sound quality is amazing and all this." So when they finally did, he loaned them a bunch of CDs to listen to, because obviously back then CDs were pretty, CD players were expensive, and CDs as compared to cassette tapes and records were expensive as well. And I remember looking at the stack of CDs and being kind of interested in that. And Steely Dan's Gold was one of them. I loved it so much that I popped a tape in the second tape deck of their tape player, and I ran the CD onto cassette tape so that I could then listen to it on my cassette player and my Walkman, because I didn't have a Discman or a CD player yet. It was later on, Sean, that I splurged on the CD tape deck boombox, which of course was, the industry standard for any music fan in the 1990s, and that was that was a source of much delight. But I wanted to end with this one too, because again, we're talking 91, 92. I'm 15 years old. I'm a freshman in high school. I just made the Wakefield High School Jazz Band, third chair trombone section for a freshman. What do you want? I'm all in on the alternative rock boom that's happening. And the way that Steely Dan was able to mix rock and pop and jazz all together and make it make sense and still have it be accessible, that's crazy to think of how many radio hits that they had back in the day, and how complex the music they were creating was. So it scratched a couple of different itches where I'm getting into playing jazz and learning jazz, and Steely Dan's using these complex chord progressions and chord voicings, and that's similar to what I'm studying in jazz band. But they're still writing, kind of pop rock songs that have a hook and that are accessible and have a chorus that you could sing along with. And I'm realizing now, when I was looking at this and putting my list together, that experience kind of set the table for me as the decade played out in the 90s, and popular music got even more complex, and you had artists come along like DJ Shadow and his debut album Introducing, which turns 30 this year. His whole thing is he created an album that was a sonic pastiche. It was all samples. It's all he did was he took samples from old jazz, funk, soul, rock, punk, hip hop, you name it, cut it all up and put it all together. A Boston band like Karate, who combined indie rock and jazz. Steely Dan getting into my brain when I was 14, 15 years old, me getting into jazz, which I played all through high school, got a scholarship to play at Northeastern University. And I even now have picked my horn up and I've been playing jazz with the Jazz Combo for a few years now. It was kind of cool to have that be one of the last things I saw on the sheet you picked to me and be like, oh, well, that's a nice way to kind of wrap that up, because it almost not quite brings it around full circle, but brings all of my musical influences into kind of a package that I've been able to carry with me into my adult life as I continue to fall in love with the music that I grew up with and discover new music to fall in love with.
Yeah, and I know I found a way to compare them to Dire Straits earlier, but obviously Steely Dan is a one of one kind of musical experience. And I also appreciate, and this is why, just part of the whole Adam 12 package that I've always enjoyed, the man not shy about picking some greatest hits out here.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, greatest hits in a lot of ways are just an entry point. Think about all the different ways. And again, you open up a greatest hits album and it's going to tell you what album the track comes from. So if there's a couple of tracks that tickle your fancy on the greatest hits album, boom, we're going over there. We're getting that tape for $6.99 and we're listening to the whole rest of the album.
Another breadcrumb trail.
I had so many of these, every time I look at one, I'm like, all right, which ones did I have? And I circle those. And yeah, a lot of these kind of staples here, not ashamed to say it was a way to get in on the ground floor. And yes, it's a marketing trick, but it's a part of the experience that I think we need to recognize.
I agree.
Adam 12, we have 12 cassettes from a 1992 Columbia House deal. This has just been really cool for me. Flipping through, I mean, it's really cool to hear about, again, where you were at and some of these little anecdotes that just are part of your story and a part of all of our stories as listeners to the music and as listeners of yours. So appreciate what you do. As always, appreciate you coming on with me.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate you having me on. And again, I appreciate, as I said a few minutes ago, you kind of reintroducing me to some of my old friends that I haven't visited for a long time. And I'm very much looking forward to that too. And that's this whole experience that you've created with this podcast does the same thing. It's a wonderful place to come and to learn and to relearn, and just the way that you're putting people like me back in that kind, like I'm not Adam 12, I'm Adam 15. Here I am starting high school, playing in the
Yeah.
jazz band, getting wised up to Nirvana. Like it's such a wonderful place to go that you don't always, think to go to those places, but it's nice once in a while to go back and touch base with your younger self and be reminded that, you were passionate about a lot of things. Maybe you still are, maybe you're not anymore, but you were passionate about these things and they were dear to you. So there's value in remembering that and maybe rediscovering it again now.
Nostalgia is good. It's therapeutic in a way, but it's also sometimes something that you can leverage. And
Yep.
that's a part of propelling ourselves on through life. So enjoy visiting with your old friends.
Yeah.
I'm certainly going to maybe introduce myself to a few new tracks after this conversation. But again, as always, thank you, and look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Thanks so much, Sean.
Adam 12's 12 Tapes. Das Effects, Dead Serious. Arrested Development, 3 years, 5 months, and 2 days in the life of. Tears for Fears, Tears Roll Down, Greatest Hits 82 to 92. Beastie Boys, Check Your Head. The Cure, Wish. Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger. Pearl Jam, 10. Public Enemy, Apocalypse 91, The Enemy Strikes Black. Dire Straits, On Every Street. AC/DC, The Razor's Edge. Tom Petty, Full Moon Fever. And Steely Dan, Gold. Music by Ceramic. And by Pierce. You can find Cracked Rearview on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. Follow Cracked Rearview Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. I'm Sean Sylver.